Get the right paper up here. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Public Works Committee meeting for Tuesday, March 11th, 2014. First of all, I'd like to do a roll call and determination of quorum. Brenda, if you please.
Estes. Nordstrom.
Here.
Roberts. Scott. Clayton. We have a quorum.
Thank you. I'd like to remind everyone to please turn your telephones either to the off position or to the vibrate position, and if you need to take a call or make a call, would you take it out into the hallway, and I thank you for that. Next item is adoption of the agenda. I have two items, one item that needs to be added to the agenda, and we're going to label that as 19A as an emergency resolution for the water reclamation plant. Is there anything else that I'm forgetting? I'm not seeing any other lights. Motion is to approve the agenda, and a second by Clayton. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, thank you. Motion carries. Now's the time for the members of the public to discuss or express concerns to the committee on any issue not limited to items on the agenda. Action will not be taken at this meeting on any issue not on the agenda except by placement on this agenda by unanimous vote of the aldermen present. And I've got one general public comment form here from Dana Duran. If you would please go to the speaker podium and identify yourself. Yes. Oh, sure. Come on up, Jordan.
Okay. I'm Danny, and I work at the School of Mines and Technology, and I'm here to talk about a project that we have in the works. So every year we have Recycle Mania, and it's a competition that encourages sustainability practices on campuses across the country. Last year we started incorporating a service project. This year, with the devastation that was wreaked by Atlas, I thought it would be a great opportunity to have tree planting be our service project for Recycle Mania this year. We've partnered with the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, Youth and Family Services, and Girls Inc., along with mine students, in order to plant all the trees that were lost at Storybook Island on April 26th. But we need resources to make that happen. So right now I have the Rotary Club. They've pledged 2 matching grants of up to $1,000, so potential $4,000, and the Beautification Committee has pledged another $2,000, but we're going to probably need about $15,000 total in order to purchase the number of trees we need. So I'm here basically to just ask what resources you can commit, whether that's city compost or anything else that you'd be able to help us achieve that vision. Okay.
Sorry, thank you, Dana. One of the things we could probably start off with is looking to our solid waste division and maybe perhaps working out something with that. I'll look to either Terry or Dale for some just ideas, suggestions, or comments.
I'm certain from a public works standpoint, we would certainly assist with the supply of some compost material. That's probably the only thing I can think of right now off the top of my head, but we could certainly look at some other options too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And that's only a starting point, so give us a few minutes because to kind of think and process through, and maybe we'll be able to come up with some other ideas for you.
Perfect, thanks.
And I do have a couple, Dana, if you want to stand by for a second. I've got a couple of others, council members that would like to ask you a question.
Sure.
Go to recognize Alderman Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wasn't aware that you were going to come up with more things to give them. I was just going to make a motion to acknowledge the report and thank them for their efforts and ask that the Public Works do whatever they can to get them the compost that they're requesting.
The motion is to acknowledge. Is there a second? second by Alderman Roberts, and I'll recognize Alderman Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Danny. It's very nice to see you. I think this is a great project. I'm sure that Jordan can show you how to get in touch with the Public Works to follow up on that. You've got my number. Whatever help you need, give me a call. I'll be more than happy to help you guys. So,
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Chair will now recognize Alderwoman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to clarify some housekeeping here. This is not an agenda item, so I think the appropriate action is just to leave it in general public comments and let Danny know that if she wants to work with the Parks and Rec Department, Jeff Bigler, and then also work with Terry Wolsterstorff in the Public Works Department, and then bring it back as an item on the agenda, and then we'll be able to take some action on it. So at this time, I would recommend that the motion and the seconder withdraw their action. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman Scott. That is correct. It is not necessary to offer a motion to acknowledge. Correct. Correct. And further, it's not on the agenda. So thank you for the withdrawal, gentlemen. I do not have any other speaker request forms, so we'll move on to the consent items, items 1 through 16. Is there any items in 1 through 16 that needs to be pulled? No, I don't have any other public comments forms. And, yep. Oh, Ski, did you want to make a? We'll continue on with pulling consent items from 1 through 16. Not seeing any. Do I have a motion to adopt the consent items? Motion by Clayton, second by Alderman Roberts to adopt the consent agenda. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Items number 17 through 21 is now open for public comment period, and I have 2 speaker request forms here for item number 20. And we'll start off with Speaker David S. Lamb. Mr. Lamb, if you would come up to the podium and identify yourself for the committee.
You bet. My name is David Lamb. I'm with the Harney Peak Group, and we own approximately a 5-mile frontage of city from Highway 44 over to Highway 79, not contiguously, but sort of the largest holding of ground adjoining Rapid City. And we've been working closely for a long time in integrated development, long-term development, seeing that this area that's on our main expansion vector becomes the place of significance it's going to have to be unless we move the Black Hills and find some way to go the other direction with Rapid City. We are now working to assure and have been working right along with a number of entities to see that the infrastructure down there in what's going to be a significant area is correct. And working on some other projects. We recently worked on a joint project with Rapid City and helped get some land set up for a new school system building and parks and so on a property down there that's right adjoining this area. And this particular request that's been filed with you to narrow and not complete Minnesota Street to the boundary of this property is the one that we're here to oppose. It is something that's been set up for a long time to have Minnesota Street be the main continuation of transit down through Rapid Valley. In essence, it's going to be somewhat the same as Main and St. Joe in current Rapid City. And it should not be set up to be narrow or not continued for that last little stretch there that takes it up to the new high school, Rapid City School site, and takes it on across to Highway 44 and potentially straight on through to Rapid City Airport in the future. It's also the corridor where all the utilities will have to run. So it's important that that not be approved to be made a limited corridor for that main arterial of Minnesota Street. Anything more I can say about it, that's what we're here to present.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb. If there's any questions when we get to that item, we'll stand by for questions if you don't mind.
You bet. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next speaker request I have on item number 20 as well is Cale McNelby. Help me pronounce your name and identify yourself for the record.
Yes, sir. My name is Cale McNibo. I'm with Spurlick Consulting of 821 Columbus Street. I represent the petitioner in this project. I would like to show you a couple of exhibits, and they give you a little background on this project. What we're looking at is we brought forward a preliminary plat that got approved at Planning Commission last Thursday. And let me pull that up so you can see it. I could rotate this probably for you. There we go. What you see is Jolly Lane, existing condition, Minnesota Street, and you see the area of platting, this location. When we brought forward this preliminary plat, and it was approved, the staff report was approved at Planning Commission last Thursday, what you saw is a staff recommendation to construct this part of Minnesota Street or apply for a design exception. The lots that take access off the cul-de-sac back up against the future Minnesota Street extension, and we applied for an exception not to construct this portion of Minnesota Street. Subsequently, it was denied by the staff, and we've requested to be put on your agenda so that we can express, basically our plan for Minnesota as well as the reasons for your support of this denial, or the repeal of this denial request. So if I can give you a little bit more background, Minnesota Street, as it currently exists, has been constructed within probably 1,000 feet of the Jolly Lane terminus. Do you think that's a fair assessment, Steve? 1,000 feet? It was done as part of a TIF, an underlying TIF that I believe was approved in 2007. There's been a subsequent TIF brought forward that was approved in August 2 of last year that's going to fund the construction of the rest of Minnesota Street. What I want to outline for you is the commitment that the developer, ZCO, has made to the construction of Minnesota Street. In doing so, some 6 months ago, he set up a TIF to fund the construction of Minnesota Street. They dedicated 17 feet of additional right-of-way to the construction of Minnesota Street. If I back up for a minute, this is a section line highway, so there's 33 feet of statutory right-of-way on each side of it. ZCO dedicated an additional 17 feet. This is also section line. So the owner has created the TIF to fund the construction, dedicated the right-of-way to put the street in, and they've also allocated, by review of the TIF project plan, $190,000 to design it, and I could pull up the construction drawings, and I think Public Works would agree that those drawings are 95% submittal. Plans for Minnesota Street are within 5% of being done. The money's been allocated and the land's been dedicated. All we're asking for is the exception to not build a small, incontiguous piece of street at this point.
Thank you, Mr. McNoby. Sorry for mispronouncing your name. I
Oh, that's no
apologize.
problem.
Stand by for questions from the council members or staff, just in case that comes up on a further part of our agenda here. I do not have any other speaker request forms on any other items 17 through 21. So we'll proceed with item number 17, which is an appeal of request for Lazy P6, appeal of denial of request by Lazy P6 Land Company Incorporated for a holding tank for Unit 11 and undivided interest in the common area, better known as south and east of 5th Street and Catron Boulevard. The chair will take any comments or make a motion entertain a motion from the committee. If I may, looking for direction here also. Alderwoman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to deny this appeal of denial for a holding tank.
I have a motion to uphold the denial, a second from Alderwoman Scott and a second by Alderman Roberts. Not seeing any other discussion. Those in favor of the motion to uphold the denial, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, thank you. Motion carries. Item 18 is an agreement between the City of Rapid City and Pennington County Auditor for collection of stormwater drainage utility fees, and we're looking for a continuation motion. Alderwoman Scott, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make that motion to continue this for 2 weeks to the next Public Works meeting. I know staff is continuing to work on gathering some more information to thoroughly vet out this option.
Motion is to continue to March 28th Public Works Committee meeting, second by Alderman Clayton. Not seeing any other lights. The motion is to continue. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Moving right along to item number 19 is a resolution of necessity for acquisition of public right-of-way over private property for the purpose of constructing a street and other public infrastructure through the exercise of eminent domain. And I also have a request for continuation. Recognize Alderwoman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make that motion to continue this item for 2 weeks as staff is still working with the property owners in this.
Again, the motion is to continue this to the March 28th Public Works Committee meeting, seconded by Alderman Roberts. Not seeing any other lights. Motion is to continue. Those
just
in
to be
favor?
clear, there is no March 28th meeting.
There is no March 28th?
No, the first meeting is April 1st.
First meeting is April 1st. Do we need to, let's continue with this one, and then I need to back up with Joel, if I may, and just to make a correction also. But let's make this April 1st instead of March 28th. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed. Council, do we need to change the motion on item number 18 since that was continued to March 28th as well?
Mr. Chair, I don't think so because I believe my original motion was to the next Public Works meeting.
Okay. Well, and I clarified it was March 28th, so we just want to correct that to April 1st. Thank you. I do have an added item to the agenda is to item 19A, which is an emergency resolution for the water reclamation plant to declare an emergency for the facility sludge pond liner. And Terry, do you have any additional information for us on this?
Thank you, Chairman. I handed out prior to the meeting a memorandum from Dave Van Cleve, our superintendent at the water reclamation facility, and he is here if you have specific questions for him. But essentially, we are seeing what appear to be significant issues in the liner that we have in our sludge pond out there at the water treatment facility. They're currently pumping that pond down, but we anticipate that we are looking at probably a sizable repair cost to that liner. It appears it'll probably be above the bid limits. So to be proactive, we're requesting that you declare an emergency for us, and we'll work with the attorney's office to have that resolution written up and ready for you guys on Monday night.
Thank you. The chair will entertain a motion to declare a resolution, or excuse me, emergency resolution. Chair will recognize Alderwoman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make that motion and retain the floor.
Do I have a second? Second by Alderman Estes, and you have the floor, Alderwoman Scott.
Thank you. May I ask Mr. Walterstorff a question or two?
Mr. Walterstorff, you may.
Terry, according to the memo that you gave us from Mr. Van Cleve, this is a investigate and then determine if we need to replace the liner type thing. So if the liner can be repaired, does that still make it an emergency resolution that you need in order to effect a repair?
We believe the repairs, even the repairs, could exceed our bid limitations, and that's our concern. If we get in and find out what the repair and or replacement cost is, I think we'll know more this week here, and we'll know more by Monday night. But we certainly don't want to have to go through that entire bid process. There's certainly a limited number of companies that supply this type of material, so we need the facility operational. And like I said, Dave can address more specific, operational issues or problems we have with it, but we're just trying to be proactive here.
I appreciate that. So as far as being proactive and having your budget concerned, this is an enterprise fund?
That's correct.
And you do have the funds available to cover the estimated cost of what you're envisioning this repair or replacement of this liner?
Yes, we will.
You won't have to borrow money or bond or anything else?
That's correct.
Thank you. I yield the floor.
Thank you. The chair will recognize Alderman Clayton.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And just for our edification, Terry or Dave, if you don't mind coming up, it would be nice to hear how pumping this pond down affects our operation and where we're at in terms of getting ready to do that inspection.
Dave Van Cleve, Water Reclamation Superintendent. Basically, the pond is divided into two sections, so once we're able to pump down the 750,000 gallon portion, we'll be able to observe the bottom of the liner to see what repair or replacement will be necessary at that point. We can continue to operate out of the small portion of the pond for the time being. All it does is it gives us a lot less leeway. We have to run longer hours to try to make sure that it's kept down. But at this point, that's the only effect right now. We are concerned, though, that there are mixers in this pond, and if this liner happens to billow up and get tangled in the mixers, then it definitely will be done. So,
And Dave, if you don't mind saying, it's 750,000 gallons on the large size. How big is that small size?
50,000.
Wow. So I mean, we can see where that's a real challenge.
It's not. That's not quite a day's worth of storage.
Wow. So. All right. And thank you so much.
Thank you,
I'll yield
Alderman
the floor.
Clayton. Not seeing any other lights, the motion is to go forward with an emergency resolution for the water reclamation facility, sludge pond liner, and we'll have all the reports and everything ready for Monday evening. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, thank you. Motion carries. Item number 20 is appeal of denial of request for exception to not construct a portion of the East Minnesota Street adjacent to the proposed Phase 3 of the Elks Country Estates. And the chair will look to, if I may, go to Dale Tech to begin with.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to, I guess, go over how the staff came up with the recommendation that we did. Per Rapid City Municipal Code, as well as the Infrastructure Design Criteria Manual, if you're developing property, platting lots, platting right-of-way, you're required to make improvements into adjoining right-of-way. As Mr. McNamara pointed out earlier, this is the area that the lots are going to be platted or proposed to be platted, and this section of Minnesota Street right-of-way already exists. It was platted previously with the first TIF that Mr. McNamara talked about. City staff doesn't have the leeway to just waive the requirement to not build something in that right-of-way. The rules we have to abide by are you either build it or you provide some sort of financial surety that is going to be constructed. That's the basis of our denial of the request. Mr. McNamara spoke to the fact that there is a TIF in place. However, that TIF is not a financial surety to the city that that's going to be done. The TIF could be allowed to expire in 5 years or no action taken on the TIF, and there's no assurance that that section of Minnesota Street would ever be constructed. Just a little background on why we recommended denial of the request. I'd stand for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Tech. Chair will recognize Alderwoman Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to deny the appeal of the denial of the request for the exception to not construct and retain the floor.
Motion made and seconded by Alderman Roberts. You have the floor,
Thank
Alderman
you.
Scott.
I was at the Planning Commission meeting that was held last week, and just wanted to bring up some points for consideration. Even if they're not considered today, they are points to be brought up or for consideration for the future. This subdivision that's being platted here actually abuts two section lines. One is East Minnesota Street, and that will be an arterial road in the future, or slated to be an arterial road. It also abuts the section line. And so the question or the discussion point at the Planning Commission covered a lot of points, and this was well vetted at the Planning Commission. Mr. Lamb spoke, as well as Mr. McNeveau.
Yep.
And both I can see both sides, because I am really not a proponent of a road that goes nowhere. However, there's a lot of variables to this property, and as the council has discussed in the past, if the road, especially an arterial road, is not put in at the time of construction and those lots are sold off, then it becomes the responsibility of the new property owners somewhere in the future to possibly have to pay for the construction of a main arterial road. The other issue is that the school recently has purchased property that is south of Jolly Lane, and so now you're going to have Jolly Lane that's going to dump into school property without really any egress, in and out of that area. Mr. Lamb's concern was basically to the land to the east, is that having that two-way in order to provide that subdivision flow. So I just wanted to bring up those couple points before Monday's meeting in order to really vet this out. I would recommend everyone to kind of stream the discussion that was held at Planning Commission. It does have some very valuable points on both sides. So thank you, and I yield the floor.
Thank you. Chair will now recognize Alderman Roberts.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Chair. And I think one thing we as a council and a committee have to remember is this was the TIF that did expire at one time, and we turned back around and instated another TIF. So saying that the TIF is a guarantee of the road is not a true statement. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Not seeing any other lights. Oh, Alderman Estes, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, John, because that was a question I had, because I remember that was the fairly first controversial thing that came out of the chute when I was elected was, are you or are you not going to support this TIF? And I recall that the engineer at the time said the plans are all done. It wasn't 9 months ago, but we're ready to go. I just made a mistake and didn't continue this, and the plans are all done. This thing's going to get built. So I supported that TIF then, and so I really feel like I supported the TIF. I believe that there was an error, and that this road was intended to be built once the TIF was approved. And so I guess I just don't feel right about now voting to exempt. You either got to get sold one way or the other, and I feel like I got sold to support the TIF, and let's get the road built. So, to fix somebody's error, and so I'm going to support the denial. Thanks.
Thank you. I just want to clarify that we do have a motion on the floor is to uphold the denial, and not seeing any other lights. And I think it's good advice for us to review the Planning Commission meeting. Not seeing any other lights, the motion is to uphold the denial. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. This is only a recommending body, and I just want to remind Mr. McNoby that we'll be talking about this again Monday evening. Item 21 is to request a suspension for the resolution declaring Highmark Incorporated a non-responsible bidder, and the key word in this phrase is requesting a suspension. Looking to the city attorney, do you need to add any other clarification to this?
I just want to be clear that the resolution will still technically be in place, but we had communications last week after you took the action to declare them a non-responsive or non-responsible bidder, that we have tentatively reached an agreement with them to settle the lawsuit. So we would like to suspend the resolution as long as we're working on getting the documents prepared, and we would intend to bring those back in early April. But if negotiations break off or they indicate that they have decided not to proceed with settlement, I want it to be clear that we can then go back to the original resolution that you approved.
And just to clarify, what you said there is just approximately April, we'll know for sure.
Yes, at this point, we just need to draft the settlement documents and a few agreements to get the specific details, but we've reached an agreement in principle on most of the main points.
Thank you. Chair will now recognize Alderman Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make the motion that we suspend this with stipulations as stated by our city attorney, provided that all other paperwork and agreements are fully vetted. Thanks.
I don't think it's necessary to have the stipulations added in there, but that's okay. Second by Alderman Roberts. Chair will now recognize Alderman Clayton.
I just have a question for clarification of our city attorney. Joel, if you don't mind saying that with the resolution suspended, then that opens the door for the city to entertain bids then from the company, which would also then be handled by the resolution if for some reason negotiations fall apart.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Not seeing any other lights. The motion is to uphold the suspension for the resolution declaring Highmark Incorporated a non-responsible bidder. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by all, second by all. Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.